Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Today's podcast is sponsored by SLI Systems, providers of intelligent site search and navigation solutions. Learn more at sli-systems.com and listen to their interviews at ecommercepodcast.com.
Your path to e-commerce success starts right here. You're listening to Practical E-commerce, the podcast for e-commerce results.
Hello again, and welcome to the Practical E-commerce podcast. This is the June 2006 interview podcast. My name is Brian Getting. And today we actually have Michael A. Cox, again, staff writer for Magazine, did a fantastic interview with Steve Woda, who is the chairman and founder of BuySafe.com, which is an interesting company. They do bonding for internet transactions, meaning that they sort of guarantee the credibility of an e-commerce merchant. It's sort of a big challenge, as they talk about in the interview here, a big challenge for small to medium-sized e-commerce businesses to sort of have that credibility and ensure that their customers know they're not going to get ripped off and know they're going to get the product they asked for and things of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Michael as usual. Again, Steve Woda with BuySafe.com.
The company is BuySafe, and we have Steve Woda, who is the CEO, and I assume the founder. Is that right, Steve?
I'm actually the chairman and founder of BuySafe.
Chairman and
we
founder.
Have a chairman and founder, and we have a wonderful leader by the name of Jeff Grass, who's our CEO.
Okay. I guess in the emerging e-commerce industry or any of the internet industries, one of the questions that comes to my mind always is, how do people dream up the things that they do? What is it that you saw that made you want to get into the business of bonding commerce on the internet?
Great question. To be quite honest with you, I got burnt in an online auction.
Oh.
So I bought something online, and I did all of the things you were supposed to do, and checked the merchant ratings of the seller, make sure that the merchant was professional and legitimate, and make sure there was some level of protection. At the end of the day, I didn't get my product, and I bought about a $400 personal digital assistant, and it didn't show up. And so I was not a very happy guy. I was getting my MBA at Wharton, and I couldn't really afford to lose $400, and so I thought about this for a couple weeks, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized this is not a good thing, right? This is a bad thing for buyers that this even happens at all, because of course that means I'm going to tell my friends, and I'm going to be more wary next time I'm buying from somebody I don't know anything about. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this is a problem that small and medium-sized businesses face on the internet today, and that is that when you're buying something as a buyer from a smaller, medium-sized business that does not have a trusted, recognizable brand, people are going to think twice about it. And anything we could do to solve this problem of mitigating or eliminating the risk for buyers and vouching for those small yet professional and reliable merchants that are out there, that was a good thing for e-commerce.
So you took on a really big job, and I guess the first thought that comes to mind is if you start trying to offer that protection, the first thing you've got to do is screen those merchants that you provide the service to pretty stringently. How did you tackle that issue?
Absolutely. Well, that's exactly right. This is not a new problem, right? It was something that lots of folks have thought about, and I'm sure
credit managers have been doing it for years.
Right, and frankly, I'm sure there's not a person in America who's bought something online and didn't ask themselves the question of, I hope everything goes all right at least. And so For me, I think this was an issue of tackling this in a little bit of a different way. There are things called merchant ratings or feedback ratings that folks have tried, and they're great, except they're not foolproof. They can be manipulated by bad guys or bad actors. And there are things like buyer protection plans that are out there, and they tend to be attractive because they provide a basic level of protection, but they don't really. Most people don't want to have a problem in the first place, right? Buyer protection plans are great after you've been burned, but most people don't want to have a problem in the first place.
Right.
So for me, this was a matter of, rather than going out and trying to identify who all the bad guys are, it struck me that what we need to do is we need to go out and, as you mentioned, pre-qualify and pre-screen all of the professionals that are out there. And if you do a good enough job with that, then you can feel comfortable to guarantee their transactions up to $25,000, which is what we do. So what we do is we look at a merchant's reputation and experience from selling online. We look at their financial stability. And that's a really important one. Most people don't really appreciate it, but most small businesses that have problems, small businesses go out of business every day. That's what happens with small businesses. And so a lot of the times when folks have problems buying stuff online, it comes down to they were buying from somebody who was not financially stable. I'll give you an example. On eBay recently, the number one seller in the world, or had previously been the number one seller in the world in terms of feedback ratings. They had over 265,000 feedback ratings. They went belly up.
Wow.
And it's not because they weren't a good seller. It wasn't because they didn't have great feedback ratings. They were the number one in the world, but they had financial problems. And so we look at financial stability and think that that's a very important component of making sure somebody's going to live up to their obligations. And then finally, it's verifying their identity, which is, just kind of a thing you have to do online. And so far it's worked out pretty well.
How many merchants have you? What will the term be? Certified or?
Well, we call them bonded sellers.
Bonded
what we
sellers.
do, yes, we call them bonded sellers, and the reason we do is because we use what's called a surety bond. That's surety, surety bond, to guarantee those transactions. And surety bonds are, most folks don't know what a bond is, but bonds have been around for thousands of years. The concept of this concept 1,000 years ago, when a merchant would try to buy some grain from a farmer in a faraway town, what they would do is they'd find a trusted third party who knew the merchant and the farmer, and they would bond the transaction. And the same concept applies here in the internet, where folks are thousands of miles away. They don't know who each other is, and a surety bond works very well. Traditionally, surety bonds are used in the construction industry to guarantee big construction contracts.
Right.
So let's say you're going to build a new tunnel or a new building. The government would require the contractor to have a surety bond. And it struck me that if you could guarantee a $40 million construction contract, couldn't you guarantee via a bond a $20 e-commerce contract? And so we bond the transactions, and we call those merchants bonded sellers.
Now, who is your client? Is it the seller or the buyer?
Well, it's kind of both, right? The merchant is the party that comes to BuySafe and says, look, my name is joeselectronicshop.com, and nobody knows who I am, so I'd love if you would pre-qualify me and vouch for me and bond my transactions. They're the folks that pay us today. But obviously, buyers are the ones who we have to fulfill the obligations to, and make them feel very comfortable that when they're buying from Joe and his electronic shop, that everything's going to go great.
So are you in a process then of looking for new BuySafe customers in terms of attracting more merchants who want to provide this bonded transaction?
Absolutely. So what we started our business, I started the business back in the summer of 2000 is when I first got burned in an auction, and we ended up raising our first round of financing. I'm going to take a little longer way to tell you this.
Okay.
So just to give you a little bit of background, we raised our first round of financing in the summer of 2003, and we launched our business on eBay. And we did so because there are lots and lots of, tens of thousands of small professional merchants doing a really great job every single day.
Right.
And that's where our business has grown up. And today there are about 2.5 million items on eBay each and every day that are bonded by BuySafe. We have a couple thousand sellers there.
Wow.
And we have started to expand in last year, in 2005, beyond eBay to other marketplaces, and we now bond items on TIAS, which is a small antiques and collectibles marketplace, Overstock.com, which is obviously a pretty successful online marketplace, and in 2006, our big product enhancement, which has been something folks have been asking us for a long time, was actually be able to bond merchants' items at their website. So, at joeselectronicshop.com, let's be able to bond their items anywhere they sell things, not just on eBay and on Overstock, but also at their individual website.
Now, I know that it's probably tied to individual situations, but can you give us a rough idea of what the service costs a merchant?
Sure. Absolutely. On eBay today, a merchant pays BuySafe 1% of their final transaction value. So if they sell something for $10, they'll pay us a dime. If they pay us, if it's a $100 item, they'll pay us $1. And obviously, merchants would not do that if they didn't see a great return on their investment. So the reason they're willing to do that is because if they pay us 1% of that transaction, they can attract more buyers, and or more bidders in an eBay situation, and obviously more bidders, more demand means higher prices. So it's not really a cost to the merchant. I mean, it is obviously a cost, but it's not a cost that doesn't drive a return that the merchant can actually put in his back pocket.
Now, if let's go to Joe's Electronics online there.
Yep.
Let's say he's using cart 32. Does it make any difference which shopping cart he's using?
So good question. So today we're on eBay.com and Overstock.com, and here in June we're launching with a number of folks, including Zuvi and a number of other storefront and checkout providers, to provide it at the website level. So today, or in June, once we hit June, you will then be able to find this depending upon who the partners are. In fact, one of the things I actually encourage folks to do is, if they're interested in bonding items at their website, they can go to our website is buysafe.com, but we've actually set up another website called bondmywebsite.com to actually tell folks about how we can do this for them, and so that they can tell us who their infrastructure providers are, and so we can go to those folks and help make sure they get bonding at their website.
And that website again
is www.bondmywebsite.com. And again, what we're trying to do is give merchants a place where they can go to say, hey, look, here's my infrastructure provider. Please go to them and get bonding enabled.
So let's say that there are always the people out there who don't need the insurance, so to speak.
Yep.
Give me, besides your own, have you got any other war stories that you can tell us about people that have gotten burned?
Well, yes. It happens every day, and I think for me the big realization was, and I agree with you, by the way. For a large percentage of the population, they're perfectly comfortable buying stuff online, and they're not worried about buying from from Joe, right?
Right.
But one of the things is very that we all know is that folks like my mom there are folks like my mom that exist that still use AT&T because it's too risky to switch to that little company called Sprint, right? You know, there are folks that are out there that are extremely risk averse. And I don't think there's a merchant in the world who would be able to tell us that they convert the maximum number of folks through their site. It's all about conversion and converting more folks. And there's somebody who's coming to their website who is looking at an item and then leaving. And my message to merchants is, if you're not focused on this issue of trust, and if you're not focused on this issue of how do I help make my mom feel comfortable, then you're losing money. And I believe it's, I kind of, one of the things I always tell my the folks I work with is to think about the history of e-commerce. And for that smaller, medium-sized merchant 5, 6 or 7 years ago, the big issue was, how do I get, especially a brick-and-mortar merchant who decided I want to sell stuff online. The big challenge was, how do I get my item online for sale? Like, how do I get this, I have this shoe, how do I put it up there so people can find it? And eBay did a wonderful job of making it very easy for merchants to get stuff online for folks to find. And nowadays, you can set up a Yahoo store in an hour and get stuff up. So, problem solved. Next big problem was, how do I enable somebody to pay me? And especially small, medium-sized folks that didn't have merchant accounts with the credit card companies, that was a big deal. And but PayPal came along, and they did a wonderful job of solving that problem. And now it's really easy to actually get even a credit card account, right? It's pretty simple. So problem solved. Number 3 was, okay, I've got my product up online. I have a way for people to pay me, but how do I get buyers to my front door? And again, eBay did a wonderful job of aggregating buyer traffic in one place. But today, the search engines are all doing an awesome job with that. So with $50 on a credit card, I can get buyers to my front door, in a couple of hours. And so the last big thing in my mind is, how do I get them to convert at a rate that makes this an efficient distribution channel for me? And I believe trust. I believe that's where trust comes into play. And so that's why I say, if folks aren't thinking about that, then they're losing money, because it's all about how do you convert at the optimal rate.
Have you had to pay off on anything yet?
Absolutely. And that's the whole point with BuySafe, is we want to help you as a buyer feel very comfortable that you're going to be buying from the best and most professional merchants on the internet. But if we're wrong, and we goof and we don't make a good call on that, we're willing to put our money where our mouth is and back it up. And so yes, a good example would have been that seller on eBay that was the biggest seller in the world, Glacier Bay DVD. And here's a great seller. Some would consider the best on eBay, and they had financial problems. We've had to pay.
You obviously must have a pretty intense infrastructure to handle the investigation of potential clients. Is that perhaps the single biggest part of your business at this point in terms of your overhead? Good question, Mike. I think the secret sauce for our business is, in fact, that risk management system. What enables us to do what we do, this is a pretty scary thing to do, right? Merchants come in and they sign up for your business or to be a bonded seller, and you haven't met them, you haven't seen their you haven't visited their locale, you haven't shook their hand. So the number one thing is there's 2 things. Make a great decision on the front end that they're not bad guys, they're not bad actors looking to take advantage of folks. And then number 2 is in real time monitoring their business. So one of the things that is important to us is we integrate into the infrastructure, and that's why I say go to bondmywebsite.com to ask to tell us who you'd like us to integrate with, because we need to integrate with those folks so that we can make sure everything's going well, right? We want to know what's being sold and ultimately whether or not buyers are happy, because if a seller does start to go down for some reason, we want to be able to help solve the problem and tell buyers about it, solve that problem early, so that we don't have
buyers that get burned unnecessarily.
What's the procedure if a customer has a problem? What's their step-by-step to getting it solved?
Great question. Well, for a merchant, it's obviously a merchant just comes to BuySafe and they apply and they go through that process. For a buyer, when they buy something online, we bond that item for those merchants that are bonded, and we send them an email immediately after the transaction saying that this transaction is bonded. You just bought from one of the best merchants on the web. Everything's going to go great. If there's a problem, let us know, right?
Okay.
And they can come to our website and they can file a complaint if there's something that went wrong and the seller didn't do what they promised. And we have an online dispute resolution process that is kind of step one of the process. So they tell us what it is that went wrong, what it is they'd like the merchant to do to fix it, and then we have the merchant jump in and either fix the problem or suggest an alternative. If that does not solve the problem, if the merchant and the buyer can't solve the problem via the online dispute resolution system, then we have a team of folks that step in and mediate the process. If at the end of the day we still have disagreement, then our financial institution partners, we work with a number of big financial institutions, including Liberty Mutual, the Hartford, St. Paul Travelers, and our insurance partners will step in and make the final payment if the merchant didn't solve the problem and we couldn't get resolution on it. Yeah, exactly. One thing I should mention, Mike, which I think is very interesting, is as we roll out and start to support websites, our business model changes a little bit in that merchants can pay for the bonds just like they do today in our business model. But there is an alternative, which is for those merchants that not 100% sure whether or not they want to pay 1% for their bonds, but they know that trust is an issue. We have another alternative, which is they can enable their buyers to buy a bond. So in essence, it becomes something that's risk-free for the merchant to try. Doesn't cost them anything, but they can offer it up to their buyers just in case they want to get my mom to be able to feel good.
We want your mom to feel good.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And your mom, too. And that's the thing, is there's lots of folks out there like that.
What percentage of Internet transactions go bad?
It's actually a fairly low number. eBay quotes 1/10 of 1%. I would say that's probably right in terms of what ultimately is a fraud. But I do think that one of the things about commerce is that buyers and sellers can have disagreements. Sure. And I think there's if you ask a retailer, they'll tell you what their return rates are as just one example, right? Those are examples of where a buyer has an issue with something about that product. And we see somewhere in the range of 4 or 5% of the transactions, buyers raise their hand and say, hey, there's a problem. The shipment's late. It wasn't the right color, whatever it is. And I think that's one of the things that's really important about BuySafe is we recognize that the merchants, our customers, are professionals, and rather than jump in and solve the problem on behalf of the buyer, we play a discerning mediator role where our first obligation is let the merchant solve the problem because that's what they do every day. That's what they're professionals at. And I think there are a lot of, your credit card company, for example, if you make a claim with your credit card company, one of the things you always hear from merchants is how high their chargeback costs are.
Right.
Because the credit card company just, basically just returns the money to the buyer.
Right.
And I think most merchants will tell you, gosh, if you just gave me a chance to solve the problem, I would have done it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And so we look at those merchants and we say, look, they're professionals. This is what they do for a living. Give them a chance to solve the problem. And if they can't or they won't for some reason, that's our role, is to step in and fix it after that.
Are there things that the surety bond doesn't cover in a transaction?
Yes. So what the surety bond guarantees today is seller performance. So that's a very broad term. That's actually the broadest form of protection out there today. What that means is, in essence, whatever it is that the seller promised they would do in the listing, on the website, we're going to back that. That means if they said they were going to ship it and it was going to get there in 2 weeks and it's not, that's something that they didn't fulfill, and we're responsible for that. If they said they'd take a refund and they wouldn't, that's something we'd be responsible for. So it's actually very broad. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't protect you against things like identity theft or product warranties. We don't currently enable product warranty protection, meaning 2 years from now the product was supposed to work and it doesn't. That's a manufacturer's warranty issue. Now, the reason I mention that is because these are two things that we're going to be adding here in the second half of this year. Is we're going to enable some identity theft protection, and we're going to enable some product warranty protection along with the bond as well. We don't do it today, but it's something that we view as very important for buyers, right? Buyers, we don't want them to be worried about buying from this merchant in any form or fashion. So if we can eliminate all of the risks, not just the seller performance risks, then we view that as a really great thing for the merchant.
And in your spare time, you go rock climbing without any safety on, right?
Well, as a risk management guy, I'm not a big rock climber, but I do like golf. So.
Well, now we're talking.
Good stuff there. That's a fascinating arena, in my opinion, as far as the future of e-commerce and one of the challenges I think that some of us tend to forget about. We spend a lot of time trying to sell products and get good websites and internet traffic and things of that nature that people sort of forget about the credibility factor. So once again, this has been the June 2006 podcast for Practical E-Commerce Magazine. Please feel free to check us out online at www.practicalecommerce.com. We'll be back again next month with another interview.